Okay, so the Esports World Cup qualifiers for Siege just concluded, and then now we have our confirmed 16 teams who will be traveling to the Esports World Cup at the end of the month to compete for the large prize pool and the title of Esports World Cup champions. And there's also just one small roster change that I want to go over that happened after I made my large roster change video after the Manchester Major. Thankfully, it was like the only one that I considered of any significance. Um, Anything else was just kind of pretty small and didn't really matter. So today we're gonna go over like all the teams that qualified, and we're gonna go through all like the qualifiers to see like all the results of who made it. Well, we see who made it here, and then see why the other teams that didn't make it, and we'll talk about them uh, briefly as well, and what's in the future for those teams. Mainly just waiting for off season, but also just some probably roster changes in the future for some teams, but that will be much later. So just to start with Oceania, because this one we can just go through pretty quick. I mean, everybody expected Bliss to qualify, and they did. They did get a decent run for their money this time. Man, LFO took a map off Bliss, but Bliss closed it out. And then Antic Esports did get 2-0 by Bliss, but 8-7 two times. So it does seem like Oceania may finally starting to be getting a little more competitive, and I hope that's the case. I hope it's not Bliss regressing. I don't think they would regress because I mean it's the same players. Plus they added Titan now as their coach, which in my opinion is a massive upgrade. No offense to Mingo Ran, of course, but he brings that experience from being on multiple top flight teams for quite some time, and he brings that to Bliss. And in my opinion, it should just make Bliss by far like the best team in Oceania, and they continue to be. So yeah, Bliss make it through the qualifiers. MENA, this is like the home country qualifiers. So, and for me, in my mind, there were like three teams that I saw would, in my opinion, that I thought could go through, and it would either be Twisted Minds, Geek, or Falcons. And the Twisted Minds or Geek because both these teams have some like imports, plus the um, the players on Geek, of course, have been to some lands, or some of the players have been to land, so you know they have more experience. Same with Falcons. All these players have played land, and they have more experience than the rest of these teams. And then I don't actually think anyone on Twisted Minds has um, land experience. I don't think Slevin does. Maybe he does from like a long time ago, but it's been a long time. I can't remember. Um, but I know none of the rest of these guys do. I don't really know any of these players outside of Slevin, but I know like some of these are imported players. Like I don't know who Toucan Q or Jalio. I've never seen them play before, but they were definitely imported, and it definitely made them a better team because they made it all the way to the final to play against Geek, where they did lose to Geek, but they did take a map off of them, so they had a pretty good run. And they also 2-0 Falcons, who in my mind are the team that I would hope would made it because they have like the full, pretty much a full Saudi Arabian team, which I thought would just be nice for the home crowd. But I mean, Geek just proved to have the better players, and they make it through the qualifiers through MENA. Okay, for Asia, Asia's always just been a toss up for like the past year now. It's just always been between Bleed and Fury on who's gonna qualify, and currently Bleed's been on a good streak. They've beaten Fury the past few times, and it continues here where Bleed beat Fury again, and I think this is very similar to actually the Manchester Major qualifiers too for Bleed. I think they also lost first map to Fury in those, and then won the next two. So again, it's nice to see Bleed here because I this team is just really fun to watch in my opinion. Um, potentially, maybe this time they will crack main stage and make it to main stage. I hope they do, because I think they're fun to watch. And this is like probably the biggest roster change that I did not cover in my video was Bleed. They replaced Ashby with Leader, and they also picked up Lenda as part of their support staff from Brazil. So I think those are big changes to help Bleed become even better. And Ashby had to, I believe, go to mandatory military service in his country. I'm not sure of where he's from, but I believe it was mandatory military service as why he had to leave the team. So good luck to Ashby in that venture, and I hope he can maybe come back and play again. Of course, it probably won't be for Bleed, but who knows? Maybe he will just call it quits after going to military too. But I hope he comes back because it was fun to watch these five play for a while, even though they never made it to the main stage. They were always fun to watch. So, yeah, Bleed again, qualify. So LATAM, this is probably what everybody considers the worst region in Siege right now, and I mean for good reason. Every LATAM team that goes to every major, unless they auto qualify to phase two. But even then, if they go auto qualify to phase two, they still get dead last from basically where they start. No LATAM team in Siege at any major event has ever done well or played well. So yeah. And then again, this is the first time I think we've seen the same. Maybe Six Karma did it as well, I think last year, but this is for Cruelty. They qualify for their second event in a row now with one roster change. They picked up Dante, who is probably like the one of the best gunners in LATAM. So I think Cruelty could be better, but I still this is still a team that will probably just go right back home. Um, for so yeah. So for Japan, again, Japan continues to just be the battle of KAG and Scars, and KAG are certainly better, but Scars continue to just own KAG. I think I think Scars have only lost to KAG one time in the past 2 or 3 years, which is insane. So Scars just like own Japan, and they prove it again here. Um, so yeah, and I think this is like really predictable too. Like pretty much all of just the teams with orgs made it through to the semis, except for this one. I think these are both orgs, so just one of them had to go. But this is probably like the most predictable bracket out of all the regions. Of KAG Scars going to finals, and then Scars would beat KAG in finals. It makes sense. Korea, PSG Challenge did qualify, though Korea's definitely getting more competitive as they continue to bring in more players from other regions, more players and support staff as well. I should mention this is support staff. So PSG Talent, of course, they picked up Yas and Rumatic in the past off season, and they were the team to qualify through the grand final, of course. Mir, I think they're a new org to Korea, but they brought in Blur and Sloth from the UK, and they are definitely pushing to be a competitive team in Korea. I'm not sure how communication in this teams works because I would assume Blur and Sloth must know some Korean, I guess. But yeah, this is an interesting team to watch in the future as well. I think they also picked up Wafer as coach. So yeah, they did. And then Fearax, they of course picked up. It still says Nova here. Did Jax not play in this qualifier? I never watched it just because of like time zones, of course. But yeah, I thought he would have. Maybe it's just they didn't change it on Liquipedia, but I believe Jack should be here instead of Nova, and of course they have Dark as the coach. But this is a big change for Firax as they pick up their first non-Korean player. They pick up Jax, who was previously on ENCE, and the Firax have definitely like cemented themselves as like as them and PSG Talon right now are definitely the two best teams in Korea, and no one else and stands in their way. They were both the finalists for the Manchester Major qualifiers, and they were and they were both the finalists here. Of course, they both made Manchester because Korea had two spots in Manchester. Only one could go here, and PSG Talon were the better team this time, and they made it. So for D plus Kia, they also made some changes. They dropped Sarah and Dimali, who weren't picked up that long ago, but they are both quite bad. And D plus haven't made events in a little while now. I think their last one was the previous SI, where they went out quite quickly, and I believe their biggest change was, of course, bringing in the Brazilian coach Mighty, or Midi, not sure how to pronounce it. And it looks like MV Taylor is also back to playing again, and they D plus picked up JLT, who was dropped off of PSG Talon, so they could make their roster changes here. And I don't think there's much else to talk about here. Yeah, I think we're good. Okay, yeah. So now for our like big three regions, North America was probably like one of the most interesting ones for me. One of the most unpredictable, that's for sure. So we had all our NA teams here, of course, except for was it Los? I don't think Los is here. Because it only NA, yeah, because Los for some reason plays in the Brazil qualifiers instead. I guess because they're an all Brazilian team. I don't know. Even though they play in the NA league, that team is just weird and bad. But yeah, all our teams are here. They all made it to the closed qualifiers. No T2 teams snuck into the closed. So, of course, the first big upset is C9BC had a very poor qualifier. They got bounced immediately by Sonics. They kind of got stomped. And of course, this was Fett's potentially last event, which he didn't make. So now Cloud9 and Cloud9 BC are going to be looking for a new coach for the upcoming NAL season. So sucks to see them not at this event, but it's also exciting because it means we're going to have a new champion. So even though this, of course, isn't a blast tournament, but it'll definitely be interesting because it already guarantees that we won't see the same team win two large prize pool events in a row. So yeah, so Sonics definitely look like they improved after winning this match, but then they lost to DZ, which sent them down to the third place decider match, and then they eventually lost to Space Station yesterday. And it was close, but SSG were just better. I was a little scared for Space Station, especially in their open qualifiers, but they after they lost to Luminosity to 2-0. But they picked it up together in the end and made it, especially with the Benjamin Master pickup. Like I think like this trio of J90, Ashen, and Benjamin Master is extremely talented, and they have a really strong backline in Forrest and Fulton, and I think and really strong support staff with Call Out as well. And I really feel like this team can make a big splash when everything is clicking. So this is always a team to just watch out for. Also, their Bleed's Kryptonite. So if it's Space Station and Bleed in the grand final of the Esports World Cup, then SSG is guaranteed to win by default because SSG just own Bleed every time they play them. But now let's talk about like the biggest talking point probably out of NA is luminosity. It's starting to show that similar to Cloud9 and Beast Coast, if you have the passion to win, um, you're going to win. I mean, they after getting like bulldozed by M80 on map one of their first series in the closed qualifier, they they won the next two maps to make the upper bracket round two, and they beat Space Station to qualify directly into the Esports World Cup. And it's kind of funny because one player on Luminosity, I'm pretty sure, um, probably gets paid less, or all, I mean, all five players on Luminosity probably get paid less than one player on M80. So a very disappointing result again for M80, not even qualifying um, to the Esports World Cup, especially with like, of course, like the players they have. So back to the lab for them, I guess. And huge for Luminosity. I think this is Luminosity's first ever S tier event as an org in Siege that they will be attending. So big for them, big for the players, um, especially with the money being offered. And I really think if Luminosity can keep the passion going, this is like a team you definitely don't want to sleep on because these guys can shoot. Um, so, and they proved it here. Of course. Do I think they'll probably win? They'll win it. Probably not. But I thought the same thing about Beast Coast and Manchester, and look what happened there. I I thought Beast Coast would be good at Manchester. I didn't think they'd go all the way, and they did. Um, and right now, that I have the same opinion about Luminosity. Is I think they could do well, but I don't think they'll go all the way. But if they do go all the way, I wouldn't be super surprised by any means. And of course, Dark Zero are going. Dark Zero definitely looked like the best team in NA. Um, Dark Zero like always play Sonics. I don't know this matchup, and like Dark Zero always beat them. So yeah. Uh, no, I don't really think anyone's surprised that Dark Zero is here. I mean, I think all these players are like some of the best in their roles right now, not only in NA but in the world. So yeah. And a disappointing result from Oxygen. They had a really good open qualifier, but they fall short again to SSG as well after starting off up 1-0 in maps. And also just more back to the lab for wildcard as well. They have good players on their team, but I'm just not sure what wildcard need to do to become a top NA team. So yeah. So now for Brazil, the only region that had 4 spots open to the qualifiers. So they had the largest bracket. Every team in the bracket got 2 chances compared to all the other regions where most of the teams only if they made it to close qualifiers they only had one game between them and elimination for the most part. Um, so yeah, I think this was again pretty predictable outside of who would be the 4th team. I expected Liquid, Furia, and FaZe to make it, and they did. And for me, I had it between W7M and Black Dragons, just based off of like previous efforts from Brazil Stage 1. I know E1 were the team that made the Manchester Major, but I said they were a very fraudulent team before they played in Manchester, and they were very fraudulent in Manchester. They were terrible, and they proved they are terrible here. Even though they made changes I think they made full staff changes and player changes, and they looked not much better. They may even have looked worse than they were in Manchester. Though I guess they won a map against W7M here. Barely. So yeah, but W7M I think deservingly qualify this time. They played well. They made it through the upper bracket. They beat E1, who are probably like the worst team here, and then they beat Black Dragons, which you could say, oh, it's Black Dragons, but I mean, Black Dragons beat Furia in this qualifier, so I think this is a 2-0 win against Black Dragons here is pretty impressive, and they qualify through the upper bracket, and then to the lower bracket. Lower Liquid lost. Fluxo looked scary at the start of this qualifier. They beat Liquid 2-0, and then they gave FaZe a big run for their money. This is a really good game. Almost every game went to max regulation, and FaZe barely closed this out, and barely. Fluxo really could have qualified to this event instead of FaZe. Like, I can't lie. To be honest, it probably should have been Fluxo. I really think they kind of tossed, and we could have had a really interesting Furia versus FaZe in the lower bracket semifinal, and only one of them would have went, which would have been really interesting. But that's not how it went out. FaZe are still the better team, but it somewhat feels like FaZe are not as fully locked in as I would say as they were like ever since they lost at SI. They haven't. It feels like the pressure is somewhat getting to them. The pressure to consistently perform and win. Because that's definitely what happened to them in the SI Grand Final is the pressure to win, and that pressure got to them and they lost. Um, so, and Furia continue to be good enough to qualify to events, which is of course very good. But they don't look to be in their best form still. Though again, this is a team I will just never, I can never doubt until I like truly see them like bomb out or something. Yes, they lost to Manchester, but it wasn't like they went out in like last place like G2 did. Now that was sad. Um, so so yeah, for a bunch of very strong teams from Brazil going to Esports World Cup. So a lot of the teams, other teams from other regions, are going to be looking to beat these heavy hitters here. Um, so so that'll be fun. And then for EU, we only had 3 teams, of course, just like NA and EU had 3 spots. Brazil had 4. So again, even though G2 had a really good open qualifier, they fell short against Wolves again after being up 1 map, and Wolves I believe also had 2 like substitute players. I don't know if Asa and Lasmu are going to become permanent players on the roster because of their success in this qualifier, but I definitely think that will probably happen now because this is a huge qualifier for Wolves. They played very well. Um, so a disappointing result for G2, just because like the org, it was kind of something I was kind of ready for them to lose, just because they've been choking a lot recently. Like they just haven't been playing well, and it did happen. Blaz again. I was waiting for him to prove himself this qualifier, and well, he didn't. It would have been nice to watch the streams for these games too, but that's another thing is they just didn't feel like streaming like the quarterfinals of uh, any of the regions really. I don't think like any of the quarterfinal matches for North America, Brazil, and Europe got streamed, which is really disappointing because there were a lot of good matchups. So yeah, that sucks. So again, though, I think this was like pretty predictable for the most part. Every EU team that made the Manchester Major, besides G2, made it through the quarterfinals. Um, and we had Secret versus BDS in the first quarterfinal, and of course BDS qualify, and they continue to look like the best team in Europe. And I definitely think again they're one of the favorites to probably win this event, as they have a very good history in Saudi with winning events in Siege. So I think the biggest surprise, which I can't really say it's a surprise because Wolves have never been a bad team. They've just like they've been good enough to always like qualify to events, but never good enough to be like to get past top 8. But they made some changes finally, and currently it's looking like they were the correct changes, as they made it through the qualifiers in the upper bracket, as they beat G2 and they beat Into the Breach, both teams that made the Manchester Major, and they qualify. So two majority French teams are our first two teams to qualify to the Manchester or the Saudi Arabia, and our third place matchup is a matchup between two of the teams that made the Manchester Major, but only one of them will end up actually going. Um, ITB made no changes, of course, and then Secret did pick up Virtue after Miracle left the team, and ITB were the better team in this matchup, as they kind of, the first two games were close, but then they just kind of own Nighthaven Labs after a pretty poor performance from Secret here. So yeah. So we have BDS, Wolves, and ITB going to the major. This is ITB second event in a row they qualified to. Same for BDS. Wolves are back making events now after missing out in Manchester, so that's big for them. Disappointing results for G2 and Virtus Pro are, I would say, are the biggest disappointments. Pretty big disappointment for Fnatic too. Big org, talented players, but they just can't seem to get anything going in EU, which is a little concerning. So yeah. But yeah, it would be nice to see Virtus Pro especially pick it back up again, because I just really like watching them play. They are just, they play Siege just so well when they play, and I really do feel like Virtus Pro, they just level up when they make LAN. Their online qualifiers are like their kryptonite, and if they somehow make it through those online qualifiers, then they're cooking. So it sucks to see them not there. Hopefully they will make Montreal. That would be nice to see. So yeah, now we have all our teams. So yeah, we have FaZe, W7M, Liquid and Fury from Brazil, Dark Zero, Luminosity, and SSG from NA, BDS, Wolves, and ITB from Europe, Cruelty from LATAM, Bleed from Asia, PSG Town from Korea, Scars from Japan, Blush from Australia / Oceania, and Geek from MENA. So the tournament, it looks like it's going to be split up into two groups, 8 teams per group, 16 teams total. Each of the groups will have an upper lower bracket. 8 teams will qualify to the playoffs, which are single elimination. I'm not sure if group stage will be best of 3 or best of 1s for these games. Playoffs will definitely be best of 3s for all these games. I'm assuming the grand final will be a best of 5. And because this event is double of what Gamers 8 was too last year, in terms of like teams that could go, and also it offers like life-changing money for all the teams. So like even if you get dead last year, it's still $25,000, which is a lot of money for getting last. And the prize pool is just massive if you get first. $750,000 US. That is insane. So a lot of money on the line for this event, and it'll be an exciting one, I think. I hope, at least it will be, especially with we have like for the most part like all the fan favorite teams, I think, from each of the regions are going. At least one of the fan favorites, and we have like a couple teams that are returning to events after being out of them for a bit, or teams, and we have Luminosity, of course, who are making their first ever event as an org, and this is all these players' first ever LAN event as well. So very exciting for Luminosity, especially, and like I said earlier, Wolves return after missing Manchester. W7M are back after missing Manchester, and I think all these other teams had already made Manchester. So most of your Manchester major teams are here. I think only 3 teams here that were not at Manchester, which makes it a little more fun, so we don't have all the same teams. Sucks that there's not 20 teams. Also sucks that the event is in Saudi, of course, a country that doesn't support LGBTQ rights. I was heavily weighing on whether to make a video on this event or not, because I don't really want to support like their government, because the event is funded by their government, which makes those laws. But I do want to support like the players and the teams, and give them their flowers. So support the teams. Maybe don't support the government. This one specifically. But I mean, technically, this will support it, because I mean, but it was my decision. I wanted to make this because I just love talking about CG sports, and it's just the passion I have. So that's why I make this, not to support anti-LGBTQ. If anyone is curious about that, the only reason I decided to make this is because I want to support the esport. That is my goal. So yeah, if you watched to this point, again, consider liking or subscribing, and of course, always appreciate comments that have any criticisms or things you liked. Those would be always good to know on how to improve these types of videos, because I do want to keep like getting better at this. I want to keep doing it. Of course, videos can't be consistent with CG sports, because they're just like the way, it's not like, because things don't happen all the time. It's not like Counter-Strike, where Counter-Strike, it feels like there's just always an event in Counter-Strike when things are happening there. Because like teams, of course, without this event, we'd have like a massive off season, and I think I would be really bored if I didn't make a CG esports video between like May and like September probably. So yeah, again, thanks for watching, and have a good one.